Learn the vegan truth with MC Fructose.
Oh yeah, MC Fructose in the house.
To learn how you can improve your health, lose weight, and reverse disease by following a diet of fresh, raw, ripe, organic fruits and vegetables void of any animal products. We'll have interviews with pioneers, doctors, and athletes thriving on a low-fat vegan diet. This is the vegan truth.
If people ask the where you get your protein from, you can tell them all the food you eat contains some. Truth be told, we don't need that much, so excuse me while I eat my favorite fruit for lunch.
Oh yeah, MC Fructose in the house. This is the very last episode of The Vegan Truth. Thanks, everyone, for listening. I'm excited today because we're going to have my friend and a huge fan of the show on to discuss some issues he's currently dealing with, as well as his lifestyle and the history of natural hygiene. So welcome to the show, Jonas Sunshine.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, how are you doing today, man?
I'm great.
We are live on The Vegan Truth. Jonas, I wanted to have you on the show because I realized that you're dealing with some issues right now with the state of Arizona and Child Protective Services with your son. And I'll give you the floor right now to kind of explain what's going on with you having access to your son and why the theme of the show today is veganism, a mental disorder. Can you explain what's going on currently?
Yeah, sure can. It's a long story, but I'll sum it up and make it short because I want to show split it up kind of evenly for some of the research I've done all that hygiene. But I'm a father, and I've never got to be part of my son's life except for 45 minutes a week a year ago for 3 years. So all through that time, it's a very unfair system, I found. This whole radio show, the show after your show, other shows on this station talk about the state encroachment on individuals' rights. But, I came in there with a positive attitude saying, great, I'm going to have the opportunity to know my son, who I've been looking for a long time. The mother never wanted to work with me from the very start. I knew she was pregnant. I tried to be part of the child's life, and I brought my mom to her house, and, that didn't go so well. She didn't want to see my mom face-to-face, yelled from behind a closed door, the mentality of, I'm always going to call the cops to solve my problems. But I was always confused. I didn't understand the person very well because she had created the situation for herself, and I feel like my situation is I'm uninformed, and this gets used against me. So I didn't know she had other children. I didn't know they were taken. I didn't know her intentions were. I didn't understand her. I was trying to understand her. She had me believing she's a raw foodist. I met her at a raw food cafe and some poetry things that I was going to. I tried to move her around, but she only came around 1 week before the birth was going to happen. I was tricked several times. I was like, this is amazing. Here I'm going to get to be part of my son's life, and this girl's a turnaround in her life, and she's going to see me as a person, and that's important to me. But then she drove out of the driveway one day, and I never saw her again, and it turned out I guess she drove away to have the child at a hospital. And there's a lot more to it because it's not really my problem that I was dealing with. It was between her and her mom, who set her up in an apartment, who had given her car, and then her mom, this whole CPS system, the Child Protective Service system, is based on anonymous tips. So anybody could call on anybody and say blah, 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 and it creates work. So I just see this as the jobs issue. So these people, state employees, social workers, they've been in this system for a long time. I didn't meet a single one that was ideal weight. They were all overweight. And the one that I was dealing with specifically, her name was Gail Olson, and she was exceptionally obese. And she was always with these labeling, and I'm coming in there with a nonviolent communication perspective. I'm like, I don't like to hear labeling. I like to have some empathy or have some understanding of, okay, you did this, and I'd like you to do this differently. Or, of course, they wanted to make a bunch of change, and even the counselors they sent me to for years, I was doing services every week, several services to visit. Reading after the fact, you learn a lot more because you get the records, and then you see, well, that's what they were doing that for. And you just thought, I'm just going here to be a great person. I'm trying to get along with everybody and be a part of my son's life, and they're going to give me a chance. The judge said, you do your services, you get your kid. That's what I heard. Now, from the beginning, I would have started different. I would have been refusing their services and being like, no, and staying up for my rights and saying, I'm going to lawsuit you guys if you don't give me my kid right now. But that's where I'm at this point. I went through the appeals process. I lost. They said time and care. And they said militant veganism is their word. They said a potential for neglect and a protein deficiency. And we know from durian riders, there's no protein deficiency. There's no word for protein deficiency. It's a made-up thing. And sure, if he's malnourished, and that was through no fault of my own, I've never even taken care of him.
Have you reached out to people in the community, people like Karen Ramsey, who wrote the book, Raising Super Healthy Children? Have you reached out to people like her and other people like Ann Osborne who have had success with raising vegan children, raw vegan children?
Yeah, I was raised a raw vegan child. Yeah, I was raised a raw vegan child. My mom would have testified on my behalf. Karen Ramsey wanted to testify for me, and they wouldn't let me even witness on my own stand. They wouldn't even let me get on and witness. So the way these juvenile courts work, there's no jury, there's hearsay evidence is admissible, and there's this no re-entry rule where if you go to the courtroom, like anybody who's been in the courtroom and heard other people saying or been in there or testified themselves, they're no longer allowed to come back in the room, into the small little courtroom. And they're not really judges, they're commissioners. And they've switched the judge 3 times, 4 years, right, for them to terminate my rights finally. So, yeah, I called Karen Ramsey. Karen Ramsey was more than willing to help. I've read her book. I have her book. I'm really into attachment-focused parenting. And at one time, they send me these different services. And one of the services was like, oh, let's get this book, Attachment-Focused Parenting. And I was like, great, I'm really into that. And I was trying to bring the ideas of compassionate parenting and respectful children, respectful parents. It's the book I have. It's from, who is this from? Victoria Kendall Hodgson. It's a great book, and it covers the nonviolent communication. It's like, when I went to school, I went to a Montessori school. It's about free thought. It's about different ages. It's about not being tested. It's about making your own choices and self-direction. And I was raised, like I said, a raw vegan kid out of Philadelphia. I called into the show before, if people are return listeners, if I heard. I got to be in the sub-branch of the Hippocrates Health Institute that was in a scene temple called Temple Beautiful in West Philly. It's no longer there anymore. Long stories about that. But, yeah, so I have experience. I've always been healthier than most of all my peers that I've ever gone to school with. And they can see that I'm healthy. I'm going in the room. Nobody else in the whole courtroom. There's about 11 of them against me. And they have these lawyers they force on me. I've been trying to get a lawyer of my own. And that's really hard because every lawyer I'd go pay an interview and say $400 just to sit with them and talk. And they'd be like, oh, I can't take this case because this X, Y, and Z reason. Like one of the reasons was you couldn't have enough money for me, or I don't want to go against the state because it's like a playground. And if you don't play by the rules on the playground, you're not welcome back in the playground. So they couldn't get more work. So people are really scared of the system because it's, and then also I've got in touch with other people who are in my state recently. We had a big meeting with the AP Press, and there's 30 parents in there that all have very similar stories. I haven't seen the numbers at that time, how many kids they've taken. They've only ever substantiated abuse, neglect, abandonment, or whatever in 6% of any cases. And the Jan Brewer, which is the governor, she just recently abolished the whole CPS agency, and her reasoning wasn't, oh, they're going above and beyond and making mistakes. No, her reason is they're not doing enough investigation. There's 3,000 cases they could have made, and they could have had more kids taken. And last year was 43,000 kids were severed from parents, 16,000 currently in care, in foster care. So it's a bigger system, and it's across the country. And there's a senator from the South who was actually bringing this issue up in Senate and Congress, and she was murdered. And people say it's because of that reason, because it's linked to a lot of things. It's a jobs issue, like I said, but it's also linked to the public school and services. So they send you these services of psychiatry and psychology. Well, those psychiatry and psychology services, they're very unscientific. They make you take these. I've taken the MMPI test 3 times, and every time I take it, they don't get a diagnosis on me. They can't. They got this thing called not otherwise specified, meaning you don't fit into any classification of anything they've seen, and so that, therefore, is a problem. But they're unscientific, and that's just their subjective, relative, moralistic opinion. How can they're just being paid. Well, who pays them? Much like Herbert Shelton said, I'm not scientific until the capitalistic masters divorce themselves. Because it's always like you can pay for a study to be done and see the results that you want to see, much like Monsanto does. Limited studies, short term, et cetera, et cetera.
I think it's appalling and shocking that they would deem you unfit to raise your own child because you're a vegan. And these ideas that the child is going to be protein deficient when there are cases where kids obviously are very, very healthy. Even the American Dietetic Association, the quote directly from the American Dietetic Association is, it is the position of the American Dietetic Association that appropriately planned vegetarian diets, including total vegetarian or vegan diets, are healthful, nutritionally adequate, and may provide health benefits in the prevention and treatment of certain diseases. Well-planned vegetarian diets are appropriate for individuals all stages of the life cycle, including pregnancy, lactation, infancy, childhood, and adolescence, and for athletes.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah, when I was
it's ridiculous that they would deem you unfit based on that. Because there may be some isolated cases where some parents have denied nutrients to their children because they're feeding them rice milk and apple juice, and the child ends up dying. Well, that's not strictly a vegan diet. That has nothing to do with even being vegan. That's neglect because you're not looking at the needs of the child. Obviously, somebody like yourself who looks into the nutritional qualities of foods and is very passionate about the health and the scientific reasons behind it is going to take care of their children. So where are you currently at with this court case, and what can other people do to help? What are you looking for?
Well, I've started a Go Get Funding link, and it's, let me see, what's a good way to get to it? You just type in 811 80-10-10 Arizona CPS. If I find on Google, but I did that. So I was trying to raise this money. One of the lawyers that lost for me in the original case, she's like, well, here's this other lawyer that I work with, and he wants this $10,000 retainer. So I was like, okay, let me try to raise this $10,000 retainer. Well, I've gotten 44 backers, and I got like almost $2,000 from that. So it's like the issue, I don't know if it didn't get out enough, or enough people didn't see it or hear about it, or if the economy is really hard spot now. I can realize that, and so it's a difficult thing. But like I was saying, I have heard stories of other parents and their child died, and they're blamed it on veganism. Well, it wasn't the veganism. It was because they weren't feeding their child, or they're giving them improper food combinations. And another thing about this whole thing that's even more troubling and disturbing is that I had all the correct paperwork put in to say, don't vaccinate my son. I don't want vaccines for him. I don't want heavy metals in his blood. The whole vaccine idea that you're going to put yourself, the poison in your body is going to make you healthy is not scientific. There's tons of research behind that. And even Wakefield was verified, and all these people from all through time in natural hygiene have been very strong and passionate about life sciences and the importance, or just how it goes, that it's not by putting a poison in your body that you're going to, those heavy metals and stuff associated with it. There's so many side effects. And now that even the vaccine courts in America are ruling in the favor of parents, but quietly. It's like an under-the-radar thing, much like Chase Banks being said, oh, you guys have done wrong and you've messed up for 10 years and you've been cheating and stealing from the whole world. But your punishment isn't to stop doing it, it's to let us be in on it. So the government and Chase Bank are trying to hold on, but we got Bitcoin coming online, so everybody's being held to account. And you saw the reaction maybe yesterday. The president of Chase tried to lash out against Bitcoin because, sure, of course he would, because he can't control it. It's decentralized, it's distributed, it's encrypted. It's going to put the world on the Austrian economic system, and everybody can play, and everybody's got a fair chance to be a full actualized individual. A little off topic, but yeah, the issue is large. And so the next stage in my court battle, now that I've been through the appeal, just ended, and they did the same thing. So they said, now I have to go to Supreme Court. So that's my goal now. It's going to the Supreme Court after the appeals court. And then as that review or whatever, it's not even probably, appeals court wasn't a real court. It wasn't like, oh, you go to a room. It's just a panel of judges who decide against you. And their decisions were things like, oh, I went down a hot slide with him. And that's just an opinion of a parent aide who is this older lady. All the people that they had who were services, they all had an agenda, which is very not worthy or not even attempting to understand me as a person, understand my worldview or my lifestyle. And they use it against me rather than making attempts to be understanding. Some people say, well, you should have just played the game and done this and that. Well, they did that. They forced me to go to the grocery store, and they went with me, and they said, buy this meat, and you're going to feed it to him at a visit, and that's going to be a key in the keyhole that's going to get your kid back. And I was like, really? So I bought the meat in front of them, and I just switched that was a fake Gardein meat or something. And, of course, I got ratted on.
Wow, that's actually extremely shocking to me that they forced you to buy meat to feed
they
to
should have
your
forced me to
child.
change. And then the counselors
was there a
that
dietitian present? Was there somebody who was actually an expert on nutrition involved with this whole circumstance, or was this just the court deeming that people have to eat meat, otherwise they're deficient? And that's really shocking to me. Was there anybody that had a nutrition background?
Yeah, that's a good question. They don't have a constitutional background because they're violating my First and 14th Amendment rights, and they don't have a nutrition background. So they have these psychiatrists and these psychologists. I forgot the name of them, but there's this doctor that they use at their office he's not a nutritionist. He's not a medical doctor either. He's just a person who rules on parents' rights, who says, oh, he's just making moral judgment, right and wrong, good and bad, making those kind of valuations of people. And that's what I call jackal speak. When you dehumanize another person, they're not coming at you with requests. They're not being compassionate. They would refuse empathy. They wouldn't even want to be heard themselves. They just have a job, right? So they're in their roles, and they're like, this is the way we do it. We don't understand this person. Even the lawyer that they force on you would, oh, you're just quirky. I'm like, no. And you try to explain to them, this is how it works. This is whole food. It's fresh. It's better than most vegan food because it's not acidic. It's alkaline. It's healing to the body. But, they didn't want to understand it. They say, oh, you talk fast. That's a problem. So they said, oh, you have ADD. I'm like, I don't think so, but let's go for that. So I hired my own psychiatrist and my own psychologist. See, as a kid, when I was 7, my mom left me with an ex-nun who did macrobiotics, messed up my teeth. It's acidic, right? And protists, I don't think protists are vegan. They're obligate carnivores, like cleaners of the sea. It's not human food, but everybody eats a lot of seaweed-wrapped nori plum balls. And so I ate that a lot when I was 7 through 2nd grade. Yeah. And then, so when I did that, I was getting away from, it's hard.
I find it just weird to me, and it's shocking that people assume that people need to eat animal products to be healthy, and that it just really blew my mind that you just told me that they forced you and went with you to the store and watched you buy the meat, and you had to feed it to your son during a visit in order to even be able to visit him. That doesn't make sense to me. If anybody's seen Tino, one of my last guests, Bananiac on YouTube, he just posted something from, I think it was nutritionfacts.org and PCRM recently, where they were speaking in front of the panel to decide the dietary guidelines for Americans in 2015, and all of these vegan doctors are coming forth talking about their experience and how there are these studies that back up the fact that eating animal products causes disease, and if you take out the animal products, then you can prevent disease and reverse it in situations as well. So hopefully, as we progress as a country and as a planet, we will start to understand the truth about nutrition. We won't be fed these lies from animal agriculture telling us that we need to with these false studies, and people, it's all commercialized.
Yeah, it's all about the money and the profit. Yeah, Plant-Based Athlete put out a great study yesterday, too, showing how it's oils, refined carbohydrates, and animal fats and animal proteins that are causing the problem for all the insulin resistance, for all the overweight. And that leads to all the problems. So they've linked high fat, high protein to all the problems. So yeah, that's what I was saying. I went to these psychiatrists and psychologists, which I don't even believe in their profession, because that lady that my mom left me was the ex-nun. She was doing Scientology. And Scientology, if you know, they call psychiatry and psychology the industry of death, because what do these people do? All they do is medicate people. So these CPS agents, all they wanted to do was say, get everybody on medicine, get yourself on medicine, get the baby's mother on medicine. She didn't even show up to the trial and lost her rights right away. So it's a system where the pharmaceutical corporations, the public education system, I don't even think that's a good thing. I just went to a speech a few days ago called Escuela Autonomia. It's about Zapatistas and how they want to be an autonomous community. Say we're Phoenix or you're up in Portland or somewhere, and we're a locality where we focus on our own issues. We have our own types of cultures, and we raise our children to defend that community or to be part of that community. And it's kind of like a Montessori thing, but it's a decentralized schooling system. There's people who can decide based on their communities and self-sufficiency and what's important to learn. But if you look at the school system now, it's just training us to be good workers. Even when I was in school, they put me through this DNA modification program. I could be a Monsanto scientist if I didn't leave Philadelphia back in the day when I stayed with my dad for a few years. That was a hard time in my vegan. I wasn't vegan then, I was vegetarian. But it was weird because nobody else that I've ever been around in my life, other than my mom, has been also vegetarian. So here I am like an outcast in the world at all times. So they say, and also, oh, you don't fit into society. Well, I'm friends with everybody, even depends on what they do. I'm still going to be their friend. It's just, if someone chooses not to be my friend, that's their choice. And then they go to my haters list. I don't know if you've seen that haters gallery, but it's very effective because you'll put someone on there and they don't want to be in there. And then you'd be like, you put a little note on their comment on their picture. Well, this is how you get out of the haters gallery, by stopping hating on this and this and this. And then Ka Sundance got out of there. Hannah Lipton. There was a bunch of people. Once they become a lover again, oh, well, you're not a hater anymore. And then I like what Karen Ramsey's daughter said. Well, could you rename the gallery? And I said, yeah, it doesn't make sense to label. If I don't want to be labeled, I don't want to label others. They're labeling themselves. So let's call it the people who need help stop hating.
I'm familiar with this, what you're talking about, but some people who are listening might not be. This is a Facebook album that you've created with pictures and reasons why people are hating on other people within the raw food community.
Or animals, just the whole concept, yeah.
Well, that would include probably millions and millions of people, but I don't know how many.
Only the people that I'm more directly in my life, like David Wolf. I'm talking to this guy, and I'm saying Jeremy Safran is the guy who gave him raw cacao back in the day. And Jeremy Safran moved away from raw cacao and said, hey, this is causing people mood swings, it's toxic. And if you look at Lauren Lockman and even Mike Arnstein, they're saying, yes, seeds have toxins. Seeds want to be new plants. Seeds don't want you eating them. Seeds have their own protection mechanisms. So if you're going to be eating, so a lot of people talk about, even Ann Osborne too. It's like, I want the fruit. The plants want you to get the fruit. They want us to transport those seeds. They're seeds of their babies, and they're looking to become new plants. So I told them that, and I said, hey, if you just do some reconciliation, you step away from that selling ants and deer antler and placenta and all names of stuff that him, Dan the Man, Matt Monarch, and all these people are selling all this non-vegan stuff. That kind of upsets me too, because me and you, we met at the Raw Spirit Fest. And maybe they amped up the controversy between the high fat and the low fat to make more attendance. But if you looked at the volunteers, me and you and all these people, we're all running around there. We're all these really fit people. We're all doing the high carb, low fat thing. And we were having a great time. And, then they had Christina Bucarella doing the on-stage things and the presenter. And
she was an MC.
It would be a hard place to be,
she was one of the main presenters there, and she was the 80-10-10 representative, but the low-fat, high-carb, raw vegan representative. Everybody else was promoting the high-fat thing, which then you get into like the whole spiritual woo-woo. I don't understand it really. I don't know how much people can relate to that. Some people do, because obviously people are following.
I think it's a sales trick. It's more of a sales. It's called hokum. If you look at what Herbert Shelton talks about in TC Fry, they say, these alkaloids, you take these strong alkaloids, and you're going to cause yourself delusions. You're going to cause yourself to be what I call in the state of disbelief, where you suspend reality for yourself and you go into these thoughts that are almost neurolinguistic programming, like best, worst, and all, or everybody. So people are thinking in these absolute terms, and there's a great general semantics online free course going on right now. And a few of our friends on the internet, I've introduced them to it, and they're like, oh, wow, this is great. So all these people, it's a great language tool. So it helps us be better with our language to not cause conflict, to not cause confusion. And we can all get a lot more clarity and peace. That'd be wonderful for our world. That's what we need now more than ever to solve our problems with Fukushima or with any number of things, from hunger and distribution of food or living in cold climates that are inhospitable for humans. That's the reason. If you look at a lot of anthropology, I like Jared Diamond a lot. He does a movie called Guns, Germs, and Steel, and it links us back to Jordan and how we first started trying to control plants and how we then started controlling animals. And that led us to having steel and to dominating the whole world. So we've been dominating this world with this non-human thing, and I don't think we haven't even adapted. If you look at how many people are celiac disease or how many people are casein intolerant, this isn't meant for us. I mean, if you're beyond a 3-year-old baby, you no longer have the enzymes to break down that sugar lactase. And therefore, hey, you can have tons of problems with skin and hair and eyesight and whatever, you name it, asthma.
Right. And that's really talking mostly about the Western world and people who, because we haven't been drinking milk for that long. I don't even know how long it is, maybe 200, 300 years. I think some cultures are better adapted, like I forget what they're called in Africa, where they've relied on cow's milk and cow's blood for, I don't even know, millennia maybe, but you're right, we don't have the enzyme. We lose it after whatever the weaning age is supposed to be, 3 or 4 years old. But the communication, like how we communicate to get our point across and to make progress in the world. And I know you follow nonviolent communication. You said that they criticized you for your approach to communicating. And why was that? Why is that? And what is nonviolent communication to you?
Nonviolent communication, it's a process. And Marshall Rosenberg is the guy who came up with it. And he was a student of this guy named Carl Rogers. And Carl Rogers had this thing called the person-centered approach. Back in the day, they were just giving people lobotomies. Oh, this one's got a problem. Cut their brain out. Back in the day, they were bleeding people. They were doing all kinds of number of things. There's like 5 different medical schools back in the day. And no medicine ever works. Medicine can only subdue the symptoms, not address the cause. So what happens with nonviolent communication, I feel like it works so beautifully with natural hygiene, and as well as liberty, what this radio station is about. So it's a process of non-aggression is something that's popular in the liberty movement and anarchist movement. It's about not doing to other people what you don't want to do to yourself, just like Gandhi would have said, or the Hindus back through time, or even Jesus and Hippocrates and Pythagoras. So he got these insights by visiting this tribe in Malaysia. And he was going there, and he's also studying survivors of the Holocaust. And he's saying, well, how do these have the ability, living in a concentration camp, to still have happiness, or to still find joy in their life? Because then he realized, well, no one can cause another person to feel. We can always find another strategy to meet our need. Even we can make shifts in our life and find joy in the simple things in life. So this tribe in Malaysia, they're dealing with developers, and the developers are encroaching on them and neocolonialism and taking their land and exploiting their resources. And they didn't have the ability to communicate to them. It wasn't just a language barrier. It was a way of speaking. So they, in their language, have this thing called abood, where children could say bood, and that means no, and there's no questions asked. If a child doesn't want to do something, no one will force that child to do it. And in this culture, they don't have the verb to be. They can't say, you are this or you are that. They can say what you did, like, oh, you're tearing down our trees and you're ruining our rivers and our creeks. And they can ask you for what they want you to do, which is don't continue to have our needs. So the nonviolent communication process got developed from observations, free from judgment, like just like the camera, like what do you see happen? And then your feelings that come about through those observations, being present with your feelings and not thinking of how you're going to solve them. And then you can relate those feelings back to the needs behind those feelings. So I carry this card around in my pocket all the time with a list of all the needs and all the feelings. And if someone's got a problem or doesn't understand something, or a lot of times what happens is people end up crossing their feelings and their needs. They're called nominalizations. noun phrases, like someone can say, I'm abused, you abused me, and that sounds like blame, it sounds like shame. And what nonviolence would do to that would say, oh, my need for physical well-being isn't met because you struck me or whatever you did, and then that's when you ask, you also have this need for well-being, and how would it feel if you got hit? So it works really well with veganism. And I learned this back in 2000 when I was working like in anti-war stuff, back when that election stuff happened and the wars and everything started going on. That was a mess. But so it's the most important part is the final part, which is the request. So it's observation, feeling, need, and then request. And the request is where you put all the other three parts together and you ask for what it is that you want. And I have a whole paper on requests and how you make them specific, and you make them doable, and you're open to know, and you can make a different request, and you try to find it in a way that is win-win-win. So it's like you want the other person to not have what they don't. That's like the ultimate question Marshall asked is, why would it be that one person would do something that would cause another person's need to go unmet when they have that need themselves? The question is hard to answer because maybe it's scarcity but people are getting in this fear mode, and then they react. When I just made a post about it on the internet trying to ask other people for synonyms for jackal speak, and it's about demands, moral judgments, evaluations, diagnosis, Amtssprache. And Amtssprache is a crucial factor in domination systems, and that's what the Nazi officials used in their language. When asked at trial, how was it that you were able to send people to their death? Because my family was in the concentration camps too, and my great-grandfather, Eugene Colowert, he was a anti-fascist. He's a mayor of a town. He was an accordion-building family for 7 generations, and he organized a militia to fight the Blitzkrieg. Maybe that's a brave move of him, but he lost very quickly. So from 1936 through 1944, him and his little Lichtervelde 13 crew, they all got thrown to this Wolfenbüttel concentration camp. It's still standing, so I can go visit one day maybe. But they were beheaded. And so it's like the official languages, they said, how did you do it? They said, well, it was easy. It was very easy because we just said we had to, or we needed to, or official policy or boss's orders. So that's what Amtssprache is the way you speak that denies responsibility for your actions and denies other people's choices. And then the next one would be assumptions and interpretations and expectations and obligations and duty and blame and shame and denying choice and making non-feelings, like I was saying, non-feelings with noun phrases. And then
it seems like the principle of it is to consider everyone who is involved rather than putting the blame or pushing the blame and everything out on other people and saying it's not on me or this is what I'm dealing with. It's saying, hey, what about all of us? So include me in the way you communicate, so you're not putting anybody down or judging anyone else or making assumptions about anybody or putting us on a different level. This is the final episode of The Vegan Truth. We're talking with Jonas Sunshine about nonviolent communication, social justice when it comes to vegans and their children. We will be talking about natural hygiene, as well as who knows where the show may take us. We might start talking about speciesism and other issues. You're listening to the final episode of The Vegan Truth. If anybody wants to call in, please do so and ask any questions. Just talk to us, 347-324-3704 on The Vegan Truth. This is your host, Gabe Smith, a.k.a. MC Fructose, and I'm talking with Jonas Sunshine, talking about nonviolent communication. And before that, we were talking about your situation right now with the Arizona courts and Child Protective Services and getting access to your son. So along the lines of nonviolent communications, I just wanted to bring up a couple issues, kind of put you on the spot here a little bit, Jonas, because I know there was a Richie Fruitbat video recently that he made for you to help get funding so that you can get that retainer fee for an attorney so that you can have help to get access to your son, which I absolutely agree with. You should have access to your son. Some people were making some comments on there about your character and about your approach to debate sometimes. And I've been friends with you for a while. I've seen you in many Facebook groups I've seen you get banned from Facebook groups, and I've seen you get in arguments with people. And some of the posts that you are putting out there could be construed as making assumptions about people's character or offensive in certain situations where you might make assumptions of people's characters or take a photo of some person and share it in some way. So how do you address those situations where you've been banned from Facebook groups and where people might assume that you are?
Which group was that?
Right.
That was the one group.
I'm just trying to put you on the spot here for these people who are saying stuff about your character and how you approach debate and stuff like that. How do you respond to that?
So the way you respond to that is you want to, like, any dissonance you get, you kind of want to see it as a gift. You want to hear, like, the please and thank you behind every statement that someone's making. So when someone says something horrible, I have a way of defending it. I don't feel like I've ever lost any of these debates on there. And the way that I'm not trying to make them lose either, though. If you enter a debate with the idea that I'm going to win and they're going to lose, well, that's going to be ugly. It's never going to end. It'll be an endless pattern of reciprocal violence, back and forth and tit for tat. And if you look in some of those debate groups, it's all that's going on most of the time. People calling names, people making accusations, and that doesn't help the situation. So what I find that helps people not be offended or get defensive is to stay open and vulnerable, which are kind of the opposite to defensiveness, not being offended. Sometimes it's the hardest thing to do in life is to hold the space we call giraffe ears, to hear from the heart rather than to be in a reaction mode. That kind of comes from general semantics, where you give a pause and a moment to think about what you would say rather than just saying the first thing that comes to your mind. Because the first thing that comes to your mind, it might be the culture that you're ingrained in. And English language is a domination culture. So the whole world has been colonized, and we live in this world where it's easy to make excuses and it's easy to do all those things I said, like try to use force to take away what indigenous people might have had a more harmonious system. I read articles where half of Native Americans were living vegan and half of the foods that we have in the world come from the Americas. So all these great plant foods, and people could live. Like here in Phoenix, I was indigenous, and this is like a mecca. We have all these canal systems we followed from the Hohokam. And it's amazing. It's 400 miles of canals, all this irrigation. We used to be like a 100-mile wide orchard. And everywhere in my neighborhood, I can still just walk around and pick trees all the time. I've had free citrus for 3 months now, as much as I like, and free dates and free carobs. And
talking about some of these things that you posted on Facebook groups, even within the Woodstock Fruit Festival, which I don't know if you were ever banned or somebody took you out of that group for a while. I think you're still in that group. But I see you getting in debates with people like Don Bennett and other people, and then maybe making an assumption about them. You're selling animal products now, too, and you're doing it to make a profit. Is there evidence to back that up? Or bringing up people like Michael Arnstein and right? his way of, his choice to make his money and
the fact that he had money for the mining business, yeah. But the research was done in there. You want to be specific. So when I was talking to Don, I was like, well, there's this D3, because I went back to the people, because he was mad he wasn't allowed on 30 bananas a day. And I talked to the peacekeepers on 30 bananas a day and said, well, hey, I want to kind of verify this story. This is what Don says. Don's got a whole website called Why He's Banned from 30 Bananas a Day. So he's kind of hiding a little of those issues. And if you look at his natural hygiene page on there, he hides another issues there, too. He doesn't talk about fasting. And that's the whole concept, really, almost. It goes back to how the body heals by giving it a break. And the biggest rest you can give yourself is a rest from eating. And my mom just completed a 40-day fast down in Costa Rica. And, yeah, it is. You want to come at these things. It's like sometimes it is you react. Sometimes you get caught in the culture of things. And someone says, oh, don't share this picture because I'm this and that. That was in the ranchers debate group, right? And or maybe it's the vegan meat eaters debate group. And they were trying to say, well, a picture that's public of theirs, they don't want shared because they're proud of them not being healthy. But don't share it because they'll sue you. And then that's like Jolita. She wanted her picture taken down. She's biting the head off a fish. I'm just pointing out, it's just an observation saying, well, look, you're biting the head off the fish, and then you're saying you're having diarrhea when you're doing your marathon. You connect the dots here. But,
so it's much like how Dirt and Rider calls out people or exposes people on his YouTube channel. You're just using a different forum to do that. Is that what you're saying?
I'd like to do it a little differently than Dirt and Rider. I think I've helped Dirt and Rider a little bit, because there's two different types of judgment. There's moral judgment and there's value judgment. And the value judgment is the things we all share, and the moral judgment is the wrong and the right kind of ideas. So like Dirt and Rider might throw in a statement, oh, they're not a bad person, but I disagree with what they're doing. Yeah, it's important to take a firm stand, because otherwise in this world, if we're this minority and our voice isn't getting heard, but we have these solutions that are fact-based, scientifically backed up, and never been disproven since we've been doing them, and it's just following nature. Nature finds homeostasis with what it's doing. Everything that's alive, even they say our body is 10 times more bacteria than it is our human cells, well, that means those things are helping us in many ways. It's like we have this whole other theory. We're not thinking in the medical terms of, oh, there's this invader and we have to kill it. It just wouldn't be possible to do that, because those things are everywhere. It's when our immune system and our system's been weakened by being acidosis or innervation and stress and not getting enough sleep, not getting sun. So that's how this guy, Vincent Priesnitz, he's a German. In the year 1799, he was in Austria, and he was very well known for kings, and everybody would want to go to him because he developed the nature cure ideas. And then these group of Germans, they came over to California, like Arnold Ehret and these people later on. So there's this whole strand of that going on. Then there was, pick up on our natural hygiene a little bit, but Isaac Jennings was the first guy who started thinking these ideas about, he's a doctor, a professionally trained doctor, and he said, why am I giving a fake bread pill, a placebo to people, and they're getting better faster? And realizing these medicines and poisons, they have secondary effects, and they're not really addressing the cause. The cause of people's problems is improper living. So he called his thing not natural hygiene, he called it orthopathy, which means correct suffering or right living.
I do want to get into the topic of natural hygiene and why you follow it and why you find that it is the best lifestyle choice for you. I do want you to know that I'm not putting you on the spot here because I disagree with you in any way or trying to throw you on the bus or anything. I just wanted to, transparency is key because I agree with most of what you say and what you have to offer, and I don't believe that any of your tactics have been abusive, or nor do I believe that you would neglect your child. I believe that you have every right to access to your son, and if people are wanting to help, please do so. Just Google, like Jonas said earlier, CPS versus 80-10-10, and it should come up on Google and the Get Funding page to help him out. He needs $10,000 is the goal to get the retainer.
That's what a lawyer wants for a retainer, but then I'm going to go to a federal lawsuit for my civil rights. I think that's my option, is to for some representation, at least some legal counsel, to say, hey, you got your papers filled out, you got these complaints proper, and I'm going to take it to a federal level because the state courts have obviously got these case laws that they use. So they got these state laws that they say, well, this happened before, and they just want to build new case law so they can easily marginalize other people in the future. And like I said, they're using these services and they're biased and they have conflicts of interest. The maternal grandmother snitches on the daughter, and that's mostly, I think, a lot of the cases in CPS is a grandparent who doesn't agree with their children in the way that they're doing things, and maybe it's their own fault because I didn't know all these things, and later on in life I find out, oh, she was on Ritalin and Prozac and Adderall her whole life because her mom put her on this stuff, or the school system put her on this stuff. So the school systems, even when I was in the school system, every year I had to have these weird forms I had to get because they were drilling kids' teeth and putting fillings in them for no reason, and they were giving kids shots and doing all these medical things in the school system. So somehow the pharmaceutical corporations have some kind of in to the schools because there's this weird thing. It's called fascism when you have corporations and governments working together, and somehow they want to call it partnership, like ASU and the business and government partnership they're making for some other reason. Just to keep kids distracted from their own self-determination, maybe, or, from education. They give them guaranteed student loans, and everybody's going to be going to school and being in debt.
Parents don't know any better either when it comes to the vaccinations and the shots and everything, because the school systems are saying it's okay, and they're going to listen to the school. It's like, oh, these are the people who are teaching our kids. They're the future of America, and our schools should know. So they're working in tandem.
Yeah, I'm very lucky to have had my mother. My mother found Ann Wigmore and Victoria Skolvinskis back in 1974. And that friend that she had left me with, she had found them in 1972, and they worked for them. So my mom ran an all-you-can-eat fruit buffet at that Temple Beautiful place. And that's back in 74. And Doug Graham, when I met him in a New Year's a few years ago, he said, yeah, I went to that place, the Temple Beautiful Raw Food Cafe, in 1978. And that was a big point in his life to make a change because he was talking about how is he going to make this work and do the all-fruit thing. And if you look at, the more I read into history and the more of these books from the 1800s, I've gotten books from the 1820s, the 1880s and 90s, the early 1930s. All these books, they all connect, and there's a story behind it to who goes to who based on who influenced who. And it's really been profound, and I really liked reading all about it. And I feel like the people in the 1800s had so much more wisdom and smarts than us in some way. Like their vocabulary was more expansive.
Yeah, that's what I want to get into next with you is how you found the natural hygiene and why you believe it's the perfect diet for you and for the human race. Connect for you. Sure.
How did it all connect? So I kind of picked up the pieces because here I'm raised in the situation where Ann Wigmore and Victoria Skolvinskis, if you look on the internet, they're regarded as natural hygienists. But it seems like everybody takes their own little angle on it. Victoria was doing fermented nut cheeses, and Ann Wigmore was doing sprouts, well, that was maybe Giuliano, but wheatgrass juice. And it wasn't to be the optimal food for humans. It was to give people in Scandinavia, because the higher up you are in altitude, you're going to be in this cold climate, and it's going to be harder for you to survive and get the nutrients you need because there's less sun. So that's what the white skin is. The white skin that people have is an evolutionary trait to get more vitamin D from less sun. And so what's happening is she's making this wheatgrass juice for people in Scandinavia, and that's why she's popular in Lithuania, and that's where she's from. And so those people were doing that. So here I kind of got this natural hygiene background, but it's just a raw food babyhood that I got, and I did great. I was reading it too, I was told. I was doing all these great things. I was playing piano. I was like playing Schopenhauer at 5. And
what does natural hygiene mean, like definition to you? Okay. I mean, I see you can go to the International Natural Hygiene website, International Natural Hygiene Society, and they say natural hygiene is the branch of biology that relates to the preservation and restoration of health. As far as I understood natural hygiene, it's eating whole raw foods from nature, not using synthetic chemicals or any chemicals, or things that are not found or man-made, so any toxins or pharmaceutical drugs, not putting things on your skin because your skin will absorb the nutrients within 23 seconds or something. So what is the definition for you, and the bigger definition that most people tend to make it something that it's not? Why do you think that is? What is the definition?
Well, kind of like Bass trying to say something, because there are people who are unsuccessful for their own reasons, like maybe they underate, or maybe they had some previous problems they came into it. Because a lot of people who find this healthy lifestyle are coming in here from being very sick, from having had all this acidic food and having poor food combinations. And so a lot of hygiene goes back to this guy Sylvester Graham, Trall, and Jennings. So these three guys, they were contemporaries of each other, and they all worked well together. But at the time, there was like this water cure thing. Like I said, there was 5 branches of medicine. People were doing all kinds of weird things, leeches and bleeding and poisoning people with all kinds of things that we would never even use today. But the pharmaceuticals are still using phytochemicals. That's maybe the biggest debate, because there's a lot of people who want to still rely on things that would do things to things. And that's not what hygiene is. Like symptoms. If you have any symptom, whatever's happening, that's your body doing the best thing it can to cure itself. So I have the definition pulled up on my screen here. Hygiene is a philosophy and set of principles and practices based on science that leads to an extraordinary level of personal health and happiness. Natural hygiene is for people who are looking for a good life, not just a pretty good life, but a very good life, and it offers the opportunity to live in the healthiest, happiest way possible. So there's this infographic that kind of breaks it down very well. There's 5 categories of what constitutes following the guides of nature, and it's clean food, not the poisonous plants like herbs and garlic. There's plants that contain poison. Every plant has its own defense system, and the plant offers us its fruit, like Ann Osborne was saying on her interview, that plants want us to pick their fruits, and the fruits are delicious and they're meant for us, just like other people have said too. Fruit has all these phytonutrients, these keys and chemicals that fit into our brain that work so well and activate it. So our brain's been very deactivated by being away from our natural food. And we adapt to eat anything we need to eat because we'll survive, but we don't thrive when we just survive. And so the other 5 things are: there's clean air, there's clean water, there's positive attitude, there's rest, exercise, and clean food. So it's just so simple, those 5 things. It's like the do-nothing approach, like step away and let your body solve itself by giving it what it needs.
It's also allowing our body to heal itself, because modern medicine,
the body heals the most.
Modern pharmaceutical companies and everything, they're there for profit, and really they're creating lifetime customers rather than healing any problems. And they address the symptoms. Talking with Tino Benaniak on the show, and just in person too, I'm watching lots of people's videos. So many people are, in modern society, they're addressing diabetes and heart disease, and they're addressing the symptoms. They're just covering up the symptoms. They're not looking at the cause, which is diet, it's cholesterol, it's fat, it's these carcinogens that are found when you cook
indoor air
animal
quality,
flesh. And the
dirty water, so our body at all moments is like toxemia. This guy was Tilden, right? John Tilden. And he really put all these other guys' ideas. He came next, and he put all these other people's ideas really well together. Maybe Jackson was after that, and these people started this. They called them sanatoriums, places for people to go take rest, to get away from it all, and to be in nature, and to get sunlight on their body. Buildings where there was windows on all sides, and they'd move the people from different rooms just so they would always be in the sun at all times of the day. And everybody moves, everybody's going to the east, to the west, or to the south based on where the sun's at and how they're going to get sun on their body. And it's just the understanding the principles that the body is self-cleaning, self-healing, and self-maintaining, like all bodies. It's amazing some of the things I revealed. Like, say, where I found it, I was going to a potluck in 2008. There's a vegetarian society out here, and it's a great meetup group, and we go out to eat at different places and friendship. And I've always sought after finding people who also did what I did for, like, holidays, because I'm not going to go to some carnist holiday fest. I did that when I was a kid in Philadelphia with my dad, and take like 3 trips to different families' houses, and everything was nasty food, and all I could eat was like string beans and potatoes, bread. It wasn't so great, and it probably left me really dehydrated. And so when I was at this Thanksgiving potluck, it was at the Loving Hut. Have you heard of the Loving Hut International Restaurant?
I have, yes. I've been there. There's one in Chicago.
Great. So you've been there, and you've seen their menu. They have all these fake meats of all the different kinds of meat. And it says on the menu, it doesn't say that it's not duck. It just says duck. So you have to ask, is this really duck? And they're like, no, it just says duck. It's fake duck. And so they have all these soy-based and gluten-based products. And so they have very little or no fresh, like a little garment maybe on their plate, and that's it. There's no fresh food. Even the tomatoes are cooked tomatoes. So I'm like, So I'm like sitting there, and this guy's not eating, and his name's Jeff, and I was a board of director at a co-op called Gentle Strength Co-op in Tempe, where we had all 100% organic food and no meat in there, and it was really awesome. But it was in the red. If you can imagine, any board of directors or any co-op's got some internal conflicts, and everybody's got their own ego, and they want self-determination, and people get confused and misinterpret things. And then there's affairs. I can get into so much drama. I could write a whole book about that. But what happened was this guy's sitting there not eating. He's from that Raw Food Cafe, which was inside the co-op, and it was a raw food cafe of Charlie Mort. And he had raw food potlucks at his house once a month. And this guy, Jeff, he's sitting there, and I'm like, why aren't you eating? And he's like, oh, they have nothing here I can eat. And I was like, oh, what do you mean? And he said, oh, I only eat fruits, leafy greens, and a little bit of seeds and nuts. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. And he talked about Mike Arnstein and the marathons. And so I went home and Googled it, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And then I watched Mike Arnstein's video, how he does it. He's like, here's all my tomatoes. Here's all my pomegranate. Here's my this and this. I just eat a bunch of it. It's delicious, and great. Look what I'm doing. I've changed my life. I'm a super athlete. I was just a normal guy. We heard his show on your show, too. He came in and got interviewed. That was on Rich Rolls. And then I saw Harley, and he was just calling out these other people, and I knew, like, David Wolf was selling my mom products that were making her have fever blisters and not being so happy, because my mom's always been doing this raw stuff and struggling at it, I feel like, because it's expensive, it's time-consuming, and it's a lot of dehydration, a lot of fermentation. She's having her buy her crock pots and stuff, and I guess that's a great way if you're in Korea and they have no food through the winter. Well, you need to find a way to store your food. So we will do what we have to do to have a backup plan, and it's important you don't starve yourself, undereat. If you're eating, eat enough, and eat till you're satiated. And eat. If you can do as much things as you can do, like go on super bike rides and be a super athlete, you're going to need a lot of calories, and have as much as you can possibly need. Your body, don't overdo it when you're just sitting around doing nothing.
Does your mother still follow what David Wolf says, or some of these gurus,
or
is she now more trying to follow more closer to natural hygiene?
Yeah, she saw what I was doing in 2009, and she's like, hey, wait a minute. And she stole my 80-10-10 book, and then she got right on it immediately. She's like, whoa, this is great, this works. And then I have to correct her a little bit, and I'm like, hey, here's this honey you're dealing with here that's got free acids in it. It's going to rob your bones, and you're still doing this kombucha, and kombucha is fermentation, and those are acetic acids that are created, and that's the same problem. It's your body doesn't want free acids, because if you look at Gerson's materials, the Hippocrates soup might not be very hygienic, but at the same time, she's got some information about which herbs and spices and the aromatic oils and acids that are in them and that cause the problems and why to avoid them. And so that's really important. If your body's going to heal, you want to get out of its way. You don't want to give it more. And that's what John Tilden was doing. He cemented all these people's ideas into a really concise, much like Lindmar, into this really concise book in literature. And he called it Toxemia Explained, where he explained what the real cause of disease is. It's the buildup of toxins in the body. Cold is the cure. So when your body's having a healing crisis, it's because it's healing itself, and that's inflammation. Someone was just saying a minute ago, don't take turmeric because you don't want to suppress inflammation. Let inflammation happen, because inflammation is when your body's rushing all those white blood cells there to cure itself. That's why when you eat cooked food, all these white blood cells, they rise in your body because they see that as an invader because it's been denatured. And I have a great video about what happens when you heat food, and it's all from a scientific paper. And it talks about the reaction of carbohydrates and proteins, because when they break down and get heated, these chemicals are falling apart within those nature of the food, and then combining together. Like Blaylock is another doctor, and he's been trying to get media exposure, and it's been hard for him because they don't want him in the publications. Just like Gerson, they've been kicked out of the country. They don't want these people to be heard. So what happened was he talked about how MSG was found in Japan. Like, why did the rations from the Japanese soldiers were so much more appealing? Well, it's because when you heat up proteins, there's two different amino acids that fall apart out of that protein, and they recombine to make a glutamate, which is an excitotoxin. And the whole idea of it, Sylvester Graham's got a great video that I put together. It's called The Effects of Stimulants. And what stimulants do, a lot of people think, well, I'm getting energy. Even from eating meat, you're going to get some stimulation, or herbs, you're going to get that. Because what's happening is the body either sees what you put in it as food or as poison. So you either got to take it and use it as nourishment, or get rid of it as fast as possible. So that's why when someone eats garlic and onions, they immediately smell it in their skin. It's coming out of their skin. It's coming out of their breath. And immediately that's because the lungs and the skin are the largest detox organs of your body. And then, of course, it's going to overwork your kidneys, and that's going to put high stress on your kidneys.
It should be a sign that when you cut onions, that the toxins in the air make your eyes water. I mean, that should be a sign that your body is trying to get the toxins out by using your tear ducts.
That's where the mucus is coming about, is to protect you. I like Janetta. She's a Belgian girl, and she talks about what's the purpose of fat in the body. Well, the purpose of fat in the body is to heal you. She's like, thank you, fat. Yes. She's like, thank you, fat, for protecting us. Because she talks about, when you're stressed out and you're putting toxins in your body, the fat is surrounding those toxins, encasing them, and keeping you safe from them. So that's why when people first start this fruitarian, high-food diet, 80-10-10, low-fat, a lot of toxins, like a lot of people want to slow the detox, and by doing a little raw till 4, because it's an easier way to go into it to get to the goal where they want to be. Because if you're going to, just like we talked about that Michael Clark Duncan guy, he's just going to jump right into something, even just if it was regular vegan, from coming from a horrible diet from before, all these clumps and stuff that's in his arteries is going to fall out so fast that he could see himself in a bigger problem.
You unlodge the toxins and put them back, and you reintroduce them to the blood system.
That's why you drink a lot of water, to flush the toxins out. That's why the water is so important when you're doing the high. But once you've done it for a long time, you're way more efficient. Your body becomes super clean. You're able to get a lot more from a lot less, but you still feel like this power of, okay, I can eat as much as I want to do an unlimited ability of things. Like I can go dance. I like to go dance as my favorite exercise. And I do like always doing new things. I don't like try to do the same thing twice, kind of say. And I can hardly break a sweat, and I can just dance for hour-long sets continuously and not even feel tired. I'm doing like handstand press-ups on the dance floor and all kinds of fun stuff. And, I get all these cheers, and it's fun. It's like entertaining. But then I really like to go around where my breakdance friends are at, and they're having a battle, a 2-year anniversary battle this Saturday. So that's going to be fun. It's going to be Tucson and Flagstaff and Phoenix all coming together to have a b-boy battles where everybody to dance off. And it's like, man, it's amazing. Some of these people have technical and strength abilities, and that's like I found like one of the biggest groups that's most receptive to 80-10-10 is breakdancers, because these people are all very drug-free, they're all very strong, they're all very clear-minded, and they want to excel their performance, just like skateboarders. We're all trying to encourage each other where it's that's why I don't like competition as much as I like play, or like game as much as play, or I like humor more than jokes, because jokes have victims. For humor, we can always find something that all life can enjoy. And it's like breakdancing. People are trying to encourage each other and work to better their own skills, and it's through observing each other's movements. And it's an art. It's like a beautiful celebration of movement, and it's one of the elements of hip-hop. And
I wish I could experience that with you. That sounds like a really awesome event that's going to be coming on.
Phoenix is amazing. I mean, we have so many possibilities down here. We have fruit everywhere. We have this awesome weather. We have no natural disaster. I know
I was there last February, and it was extremely, it was warm outside. I was like, wow, this is February. I'm sure there's places it does get cold. But we actually have to take another break for a few minutes. Okay. We were talking with Jonas Sunshine about natural hygiene and the benefits of it. We'll be back on The Vegan Truth, talk about any vegan issue. This is the final episode of The Vegan Truth. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Vegan Truth. This is your host, Gabe Smith, a.k.a. MC Fructose. We're talking with Jonas Sunshine right now. We're talking about the benefits of natural hygiene and eating a whole plant-based diet directly from the earth, what nature's provided for all living creatures. Mm-hmm. What I was talking to Jonas about, we were talking during the break, one thing that I'm dealing with right now with my father is that he's recently been, if you listen to the show before, you know this, he was in the hospital, he has had a couple heart attacks, he was dead for a few minutes, and recently he was back to the hospital again because his heart rate he couldn't control. It was up to 180 resting heart rate, and I finally convinced him to go on a low-fat vegan diet, a plant-based diet, as designed by Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn in the book Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. Now, my father, who was shocked and scared to die, he's not scared of death, he wants to live his life. That's why he's doing this, but it's like an elimination diet. He's taking out the animal products. He's taking out the fats, so no oils or anything. He's not even eating nuts or seeds, but he looks at other foods as still appetizing and appropriate, which is still part of the program, so he's eating lots of starches and beans, whatever, things out of cans, but then he doesn't take time to actually look at some of the ingredients, which preservatives and synthetic chemicals, and he was even eating candy the other day, Dots, because they follow the program. They're low-fat. They don't have any oil. There's no animal products involved, so it's okay and appropriate to eat. But looking at it from a perspective of trying to heal the body and knowing that the body heals itself, all we have to do is supply it with food. We shouldn't be putting man-made products in this at all. I mean, can you address this issue at all, Jonas, where,
that's like a fractured approach. Yeah, that's like where you've taken apart the different components and you've recombined them in a different way. There's food colorings in there, like you said, preservatives. And when you heat sugars, like I was saying, that Blaylock thing, when you heat sugars, you're transforming like those carbohydrates into things they weren't before that. So mutagens and carcinogens come about And these are things the body doesn't understand. The body's going to be like, wow, like I was saying during the break too, my mom had 3 rules for me as a kid. No refined sugar, no meat, and no TV, because the TV is just full of brainwashing advertisement. And it was the advertisement she would keep me away from. And then when I got a hold of sugar for the first time, I was buying directly from the candy man, and I was like a rush as could be, you know, like drinking Coca-Colas. And, you know, it was, again, bad for my teeth, just like the macrobiotic diet was. But, yeah, so it's doing a whole plant-based diet, like you're saying, that's the optimum. It's got all the parts nature designed it perfect for. It's got the 80% carbohydrate on average, 10% fat on average, and 10% protein. That's everything the body needs, just about getting enough of it, and we're going to thrive. And so when you do that fractured approach, you take apart and make a powder of protein, or you make a 100% fat oil. That's nothing the body understands. That's going to clog us up, and it's going to throw off our homeostasis. And we're going to have problems. We're going to have symptoms.
I think when we're dealing with the general population, most people, because something like 98% of the population still eats animal products. A good portion of the population gets a lot of their meals from fast food restaurants. And it really should be. I think our focus should be on progress and not perfection. So with my dad, I'm going to say I'm very proud of him, and I'm encouraging of him.
Yeah, definitely.
And when he eats something that I wouldn't necessarily eat, whether it be candy or something with some kind of chemical or preservative in it, I wouldn't eat it, but I'm still encouraging him in the fact that he's not eating animals, that he's not eating oil, that he's still making progress.
Definitely.
And then it's an education process.
Yeah. It is a step-by-step process, right? Like when I did this, the first thing that I saw in 2002 was that acrylamide study, and I said, wait, I'm taking out acrylamide. I'm not going to eat anything fried or baked anymore. I'm the only boiled stuff. So I have like quinoa and yams and broccoli all the time. But then when I cut out the oils and I cut out the salt, I didn't know why. Why am I adding salt to water? Make it boil faster? I didn't understand that. You know, that's what I always thought, right? And maybe I taught that in science class. Put salt in your water because it makes it boil faster, and it's in cooking books. Salt in your water before you do things. So it was an elimination process. I took out the grains, I took out the oil, I took out the salt, and the next day my blood oxygen level was so high, and the higher your blood oxygen is, cancer and disease can't live in your body if you have a good, healthy body, because living cells will reject anything harmful to them, and everything's working to help us in our body. So I have a funny story about Halloween. We had a Halloween fruit lust party in my house, and I had this thing where I was making a sign for kids. Like, okay, let's give us all your fat and sugar candy. If you got sugar and fat in the candy together, that's the candy that's going to make you fat and sick. But if you're going to eat candy, I'm not going to stop you from eating candy. You know, I enjoyed candy as a kid, and it was, you know, like when I got a hold of it, like 10. But then when I was like, well, throw away your high-fat candy here and take more sugar. I was just giving away fruit and stuff, but I was giving little lectures to kids about the importance of not eating the sugars and the fats together. Just like Durian Rider, right? He's going to pound, or a lot of these other people, they're going to pound a pound of sugar in their smoothie. Okay, but if they put a drop of oil in there, that would change the whole chemistry of everything. So they want to run like rocket fuel, and their life might be a little shorter because of that. But at the same time, they want to make an example, and they're proving something, and they're proving it right. They're showing, hey, we can do this, and it's not the sugar that's the problem, it's the refinement of the stuff. So they're getting the most natural whole things like coconut sugar and things that are less processed, like cane sugar. It's from the grass, sure, but it will work for those people in the harder situations where they don't have the availability. They're not living in the tropics. They don't have the abundance. But in nature, if you find it, the abundance is there. There's more than enough. I could never pick all the fruits that were on the tree because there's too many of them. So there's all these things that are going to waste. If people were to activate and actualize their own destinies and realities, and once they have this knowledge, I feel like it's hard to go back. A lot of people might be coming from health issues. So then they solve their issues, and then they go backwards a little bit, and they test, I'm trying the eating again. It didn't work for me. That's the reason, like Christina and Megan, they're not going to all of a sudden start eating tons of cooked food. I mean, Megan might take a nibble here and there because she's feeding Joey, like she said. But other than that,
Durian Rider and Freely are promoting these foods as backup plans because not everyone has access to it, and not because it's optimal. They're always saying that fruit is optimal. They're always saying that first.
Yeah, and I don't like how they got thrown off the bus there. And that's why I did have those little debates there, because I wanted to hold space for everybody and bring about resolution in that group. I wanted to say, but they didn't want me to do that, and there's too many conflicts of interest, and people are coming in with their supplemental approach, and then there's in natural hygiene, supplementation, you can correct, your body has everything it needs in it. It's just a matter of assimilation and absorption. So when we put things in our body that prevent that assimilation and absorption, that's what's going to cause the problem. And like Doug said, supplement to save a life, but people aren't saving their life. They're just, they've been told something by someone. You're like, I need that. Okay, get it measured, and if you have a problem, there's another way to address it rather than causing dependence and deficiency, which will be the long-term result of an expensive piss of a supplementation approach. Because I've never supplemented, and I've never had a problem. And so the same other people like Doug and Ann and Christina, for these long-term people, we're thriving, and we're not needing to take that fractured approach to find health.
I know that you were raised as a vegetarian, and you've been vegan for, I don't even know how long, like 11, 12 years, maybe longer.
No, I started at 15 when these Rastas introduced me to this movie Blood of the Beast in 1949. It's a movie, you can search it, Blood of the Beast, on YouTube. I put it up on YouTube. It's a black and white movie of a slaughter plant. And then also showed me a porno movie called The Story of O. It was the first porno book ever written. It's about this woman being dominated. And they kind of made the connected the dots. You know, domination, the death of animals, it's unfair, and how sick it was. It's on black and white, but it's still pretty sick to see cows' faces moving for 10 hours. They're still twitching after they've been killed for, that's just the head is severed. And then also they told me, yeah, well, domestication is phallic. Why are people controlling the sex of other animals? And at that time, my mom had goats, and I didn't like that the goats were always sad and always captivated, and the milk was nasty. She always tried to give me the milk, and I hated it. And so at that time, I was like, I'm going to go vegan, because these people, Ricky and Susan were their names, and they're from Providence, Rhode Island. And they were showing me these movies, and they told me those things, and they made these amazing bakes where they just put all this stuff together in a pan, and it was delicious. It was some of the greatest food I had at the time. And then that just spurred me. And then they said, when you're 20, make sure you go 100% vegan. And then on my 20th birthday, I'm out at lunch with some coworkers. I'm an architect, like doing green architecture and sustainability. And a holistic approach matters very much, because the boss, he's sick, and he's drinking Cokes and burgers, and he's talking about holistic approaches. And I'm like, no, that's not it, you know? And so here at the lunch, I had a 4-cheese sandwich. That was the last cheese I ever had. And it was like provolone, Swiss, Munster, and American, all in one sandwich, because I didn't eat meat. So I was just like, give me more cheese. And then not eating that cheese anymore, what a good change in my life. So that's one transition, was to cut out the cheese. One transition was to cut out the baked and heated stuff. And the other transition was to cut out I did it all at once there. I played around a little bit. I had like evening beans. And then I realized, it just made me tired. It heavied me down. It made the body smell a little bit. And it wasn't optimum.
Once you start taking those eliminations, you start taking things out, you do start to realize how your body is affected by different foods, and how, what is our main fuel source. Like, I know for myself, when I have a big-ass smoothie, then I have so much energy for days. And it's not just physical performance, but it's also mental clarity. And I didn't realize that when I was a vegetarian. I had no idea. Just like a person following a standard American diet, I was on the standard American vegetarian diet, eating cheese and fried things all the time, I really couldn't pay attention to the way how my body was reacting to the food, or I was just hungry, and I was going off of what my taste buds were telling me rather than actually the way it was affecting my body, because I became very overweight eating a vegetarian diet. But in terms of...
I'm proud of your dad, man. That's awesome that your dad made that change, man. Like, that your dad, took it upon himself and listened to your advice. That's awesome. I wish more people had, because reading so many people, they're like, their parents are giving them so much blowback. But that's like a Gandhi thing. If someone's going to fight you, that means they've gotten to the second step, where the next step they're going to accept. First, they're probably ignoring you, and then they're going to fight you about it. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, they're doing it. So people come up to me all the time. They're like, I've changed my life. I've never eaten.
I have teenagers and kids contact me all the time telling me, I want to go vegan, but my parents won't let me. Or I saw your video about your transformation and what happens on egg farms, and I don't want to support that anymore, but my parents won't let me. They're forcing me to eat meat. That is a huge issue. How do you help children who don't want to be partaking in this unhealthy lifestyle anymore of eating animal products, but their parents are forcing them to?
That's horrible. It's like the government's forcing you too. The corporations, like all this authoritarian in society, I think it's going to lead to this mass libertarian revolution in society here, because it is about individuals' free choices. Even children, like youth suffrage has yet to happen. Children having their rights to make their decisions. I'm a Belgian citizen too, and so in Belgium, everybody gets to vote. You're a kid. Maybe your parents will take your vote before you're 14, because society's aging and they don't have as many kids anymore. So in order to have the education benefits, as compared to the health benefits, which the older people want, they have to let these children vote. Otherwise, they wouldn't have the schooling they want, because they wouldn't be voted for. So it's important to give everybody representation in society.
Extended towards, I just watched that movie, Speciesism, which is now available on Vimeo.
That's my favorite movie right now.
And I know it's amazing because it puts things in perspective. It's a young man who's in his mid-20s who sets out to disprove all of the animal rights advocates, what they're saying about what's happening on factory farms. He goes out to disprove it. He goes out to prove that the conditions on factory farms are actually decent and that they have humane practices when it comes to treatment and slaughtering of animals. But what he finds is that there's no justifiable reason to be harming animals, and that looking at Richard Dawkins and people who have proved that animals actually feel pain in the same capacity and to the same degree that humans do. You can see it when you take a calf away from a mother, or from a cow, or even from a whale I watched Blackfish the other day too, and you see they take the calf away from the mother whale. They scream and they show huge signs of
they have
depression.
Families. They don't want to be in cages. Yeah. They definitely want to be in cages. Like, we were in this group called Direct Action Everywhere, and we went to see the Blackfish movie together, and we're having an action this Saturday. It's a nationwide action, and we're going to go to Chipotle, and we're going to say, you guys have said that there's, fair treatment of animals on your situations. There's not fair treatment of animals. It's been disproven. So they're trying to use PR marketing to trick people to want to come into their place to offer both options. Like, great, dual power is okay because it'll shift eventually, and the one way will win out that is healthier, hopefully. At the same time, they're lying about that fair treatment of animals. Like, we went with this, it's an amazing group called Direct Action Everywhere, and it's most protest groups you go to, and they'll send the riot police out to stop you. But this group, they have these special police, they're called the Free Speech Police, and they come out and they help us. They'll hold our signs for us. They start going vegan themselves, and they're really helpful. They'll hold space for us. So if anyone tries to be aggressive and stop us, if they try to kick us out and call the cops on us, they're like, no, we are the cops, and they have rights, and we're here to protect their rights. So it's kind of cool.
Awesome.
And then we're getting the word out. So we're making direct action. We're putting our bodies on the line. We're going into establishments where they have foie gras. I don't know if you saw that foie gras video, but that's a really powerful video. My friend Eddie, man, he's got quite the voice. He yells on the microphone, and he's got really powerful words, and he's a school teacher.
Wow.
Yeah. So he's really profound, and he speaks with a force that he's to be reckoned with, and it's almost emotional.
It's amazing that people justify the suffering of animals as being less important somehow to that of humans, whereas the suffering is equivalent. When any creature suffers, we suffer as equals. They have just the same capacity as we do, but people tend to brush it under the carpet saying it's less important. A cow doesn't mean as much, or it's not as important, but it's not whether they can talk or whether they can reason. It really, truly is whether they can suffer. And I love that movie, Speciesism, the movie, because he addresses that question, and he goes out into the public and he talks to people. Why is their suffering less important than humans? And nobody can answer that question, because in the long run, you can relate it back to racism and sexism, and we're part of this group. Why do we exclude the welfare and the rights of other beings? And people are like, well, the justice system doesn't include other animals. Well, once it didn't include black people or women, so that's really not a reason. Or we are more capable of, we have the potential for morality and reason. Well, certain humans do not, like babies or the mentally disabled people do not have that ability, but yet we still consider them under the umbrella of ethics being treated humanely. So it really doesn't make any sense. And it's very similar to, the way people thought way back in the day when slave trader and slave was around. People actually believed, I'm a white man, so I'm more important somehow. And they just knew it without a reason of a doubt. But question those things, question your own beliefs.
Natural hygiene has been instrumental in the abolition movement and ending slavery. Natural hygiene started veganism. Natural hygiene is where it all comes from, raw food, everything. So natural hygiene goes back to Hippocrates and Jesus and all these people before them even. If you think through time, for 6 million years, we're in the jungles having monkeys have 40 times better memory than humans. Like a 30-year-old college student and a 6-month-old monkey, a monkey just blows them out of the water. The monkey knows, it's their lifeblood to know where the trees are, when to go where, and that's what they need to know. That's how they survive. And we're out of our element for so long now that our brain has shrunken, and we used to be Cro-Magnon man. Cro-Magnon man was 7 feet tall. He was actually a much more robust person than us, and we've shrunk.
So in many ways, we've actually been de-evolving, where people think, oh, well, we've eaten animals, and that's what made us superior to the rest of the animals, and that's how we gained our great psychic ability and everything. But we have 3 minutes left of the show, Jonas, so I just want people, if they want to reach out and help you, and where they can find you, and where they can connect with you, where can people find you?
Yeah, my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is Antisthenes. He's one of my favorite philosophers, because he's the guy who taught Diogenes about simplicity and virtue, and it's ANTISTHENEZZ. Then I have a personal one where I just put videos and music and stuff, and that's just Jonas Sunshine. And those are both YouTube channels. And then another thing that's a really good resource is my Scribd account, where I put tons of PDFs. I'm scanning all these old 1800s books, and it's just profound knowledge. And it's Diogenes with a Z, so DIOGENEZ, and on Scribd.com. And that's what I was going to say to you. You said it's like Derek Jensen. He's the guy who writes a book called Endgame, and it's all about, he's got a movie, it's called End-Civ, that's just amazing. That's one of my other favorite documentaries. It talks about how it's unsustainable. We're not sustainable on this earth. So what happens is all development takes violence against nature. And if nature is the governor, nature is what everything, science can just measure stuff, and religion is just someone's imagination of what might be. But nature is what it all exists within. And that's why we're following the principles of nature, and we're finding the best results by following the guides of nature. And nature is a holistic system where everything is a different part and it all works together. Yeah, like do no harm is like this guy. His name is Jay Dinesh, and he was a student of Dr. Shelton, and he's the guy who started the American Vegan Society because he wanted to do something for the animals, and he was Jain. And so their philosophy of the Jains has a lot to do with this too, because they're about not even stepping on things, and they're doing everything they can to minimize harm, and that's what veganism comes from, about do no harm, and that connects back to liberty. So everything connects. That's what I feel like, and it's when we amalgamize and mix together these different concepts, we have the chance to change this whole world. This is like the biggest revolution that's ever happened, and if you look in history, Herbert Shelton was persecuted, and all these other people, they've been persecuted and shut down by these powerful industries because those industries have a profit at stake, and they're not even people. So it's our imaginations. When we change our mind, our actions change. So if everybody just says tomorrow, let's all ditch the dollar and let's all use Bitcoin, we'd be using Bitcoin and we'd be a better off world for it because we'd have control over our own destiny rather than letting a Federal Reserve Bank just print away the money to oblivion and inflate like Zimbabwe or there's currency wars. Everybody in the world accepts a system that can work for us
Jonas,
all.
I want to thank you for being on the show. Thank you for being on the show. This has been the last episode of The Vegan Truth. Sorry to say goodbye, but I need to focus on other things in my life. I'm going to leave you with a quote from, you've probably heard this quote if you've seen the movie Earthlings, which I recommend everybody see. This is by Henry Beston. This is the last. Thank you, everyone. Have a fantastic day. This is leaving you with this quote. Everybody, We patronize them for their incompleteness, for their tragic fate of having taken form so far below ourselves, and therein do we err. For the animal shall not be measured by man. In a world older and more complete than ours, they move, finished and complete, gifted the extension of the senses we have lost or never attained, living by voices we shall never hear. They are not brethren. They are not underlings. They are other nations, caught by ourselves in the net of life and time, fellow prisoners of the splendor and travail of the earth. Thank you all for listening. Have a fantastic day. You've been listening to The Vegan Truth. Peace and health, everyone.
See you on the internet. Yep. Bye.